A millionaire got a homeless woman pregnant. Everyone laughed at him, but they regretted it. 5 years later, David was sitting in his luxury car, waiting at a traffic light, when his eyes met Clara's, a young homeless woman sitting on the sidewalk. What seemed like just another ordinary day quickly turned into the beginning of something he never imagined. Clara sat there in worn-out clothes, her eyes empty, while David, surrounded by wealth and status, felt a deep unease for the first time in a long while. That moment seemed to answer a question he didn't even know he had been asking. What could make such a powerful man care about a young woman who had lost everything? To Clara, that encounter was just another pity-filled glance, destined to disappear as quickly as it came. But for David, something about the situation pushed him to do the unexpected, help Clara rewrite her story. What seemed like a simple decision quickly became a source of ridicule for everyone around him. Criticism, laughter, and judgment poured in. But David knew this was about more than just an act of compassion, and so began a journey that would challenge prejudices and reveal the profound impact of good deeds. David had no idea how much that encounter would change his life, his worldview, and even his understanding of family. He was about to learn the true meaning of overcoming barriers, finding love in the unlikeliest places, and witnessing the rise of genius amid chaos. Are you ready to be amazed by what happened next? David was the perfect picture of success in society's eyes, a businessman with countless achievements and immense wealth. Yet, his life secretly felt like an empty marathon of grand events and shallow relationships. Lavish parties, fake smiles, and endless business meetings had become a routine that left a growing void within him. On a typical day, returning from yet another meeting, his eyes locked on Clara, a young woman sitting on the sidewalk with a vacant look and a face marked by a history of pain. Her image echoed in his mind, a silent call he couldn't ignore. Clara, on the other hand, was used to being invisible. Life on the streets had hardened her heart and eroded her trust in people. She viewed every glance as either a threat or an empty promise. When David stopped to talk to her for the first time, her response was silence laced with resistance. After all, why would a well-dressed man so far removed from her reality be interested in helping her? To her, it seemed like another superficial charity gesture that would vanish into thin air. But David didn't give up. Sleepless nights spent thinking about that young woman drove him back to the same sidewalk, day after day. He tried offering food, clothes, even a place to stay, but Clara always refused. Her resistance intrigued him even more. Why was she so determined to shut the world out? With each visit, a fragile thread of connection began to form, however tenuously. What David didn't know was that this connection, still in its infancy, would transform both their lives in ways no one could predict. Meanwhile, David's colleagues began to notice his behavior. "You're obsessed with something, aren't you?" a close friend joked. But there was something in David's tone that even he couldn't fully explain, a determination he couldn't shake. It wasn't just about helping Clara. It was as if the encounter had awakened in him an urgent need to fix something far greater than her life. This new attitude drew attention and criticism, but David seemed deaf to everything except the voice pulling him back to that sidewalk. Clara, too, couldn't understand why this man kept coming back. During one visit, he brought a book and quietly left it beside her before walking away. It was a story about resilience and transformation. Though Clara wouldn't admit it, she read every word. It made her think. Maybe there was something different about David. Maybe he saw something in her that she no longer saw in herself. But what could come of this? Would it be another empty promise, or the start of something truly transformative? David kept coming back to that same sidewalk every day, bringing not just supplies but an unusual patience and willingness to listen. At first, Clara barely spoke. Her posture was defensive, her answers curt. But David sensed that behind her tough exterior was a person who just needed a reason to trust. Gradually, he began sharing stories about his own life, how he felt empty despite his success, how superficial relationships left holes in his soul. At first, Clara only listened, but over time she started to respond with small sentences, testing the waters. One night, While they shared a snack on the sidewalk, Clara finally opened up about her past. She spoke of losing her parents in a tragic accident, how her attempts to find shelter with relatives had failed, and how life on the streets had pushed her into tough choices and bad habits. She didn't cry, but her voice carried the weight of her experiences, making it clear how deeply they had shaped her worldview. For the first time, David realized his presence wasn't just charity. It was the support Clara had never had. As time passed, their relationship began to shift. Clara no longer saw David as a stranger meddling in her life, but as someone genuinely willing to help without ulterior motives. One day he took her to a simple cafe. To her, it felt like another world. "You don't have to live like this forever," he said with a conviction that made her look at him differently. For the first time, she considered the possibility of an escape. David, too, began to change. His time with Clara made him question his own privileges and the opportunities he had taken for granted. He came to understand that helping wasn't just about giving money. It was about investing time, attention, and most importantly, respect. Inspired by their growing bond, he decided he wanted to do more than offer material help. He wanted to create an environment where Clara could start believing in herself and the world again, and this was just the beginning of a transformation that would affect not only the two of them, but everyone around them. David's decision to help Clara quickly became the center of attention and criticism. His closest friends didn't understand. "Why are you spending so much time and energy on someone who has nothing to do with your life?" they asked, their tone full of disapproval. At work, rumors began to circulate, and at social events, cruel jokes were common. To outsiders, it seemed insane for such a successful man to involve himself with someone like Clara, a young woman living on the margins of society. But to David, the real absurdity was how quick people were to judge without knowing the full story. The media, always hungry for a scandal, soon turned the situation into a spectacle. Sensational headlines painted David as a lost millionaire, someone ruining his reputation with an over-the-top act of charity. Photos of Clara standing beside him started to circulate, accompanied by harsh comments and accusations that she was taking advantage of him. Clara, already burdened by social rejection, now faced even greater pressure. Suspicious glances and cutting remarks followed her everywhere. The prejudice, once silent, had become vocal and direct. Despite all the adversity, David refused to give in. He faced the stares and comments with unwavering resolve, even when it cost him business deals or invitations to important circles. For him, the truth about Clara was far more important than any criticism he could receive. "While everyone else only sees her clothes or where she lives, I see someone who still has so much to offer the world," he often said, with conviction. His faith in Clara's potential was unshakable and began to impact not just her life, but also his own perspective on the world. Clara, meanwhile, felt conflicted. David's help meant a lot to her, but being at the center of so much judgment was terrifying. She didn't want to be seen as a burden or a poor judgment on David's part. Yet David's determination and insistence on treating her with respect and dignity began to awaken something new within her, hope. Though the road ahead was uncertain, the strength she saw in David inspired her to believe that perhaps, finally, there was a place for her outside the streets. One ordinary afternoon, during one of their increasingly frequent conversations, Clara hesitated before revealing something she had been keeping to herself. "I'm pregnant," she said softly, her eyes avoiding his. The confession unleashed a storm of emotions for both of them. Clara was terrified of what lay ahead. How could someone in her situation raise a child? David, caught off guard, felt the weight of responsibility grow even heavier. He knew this moment wasn't just a challenge, it was an opportunity to re-evaluate his priorities and beliefs. The news created a whirlwind in David's life. The comments, already harsh, now took an even more vicious tone. "He's completely lost his mind," his friends exclaimed. Clara wasn't spared either. Society was quick to point fingers, suggesting that the pregnancy was a way to trap him. Yet, instead of being discouraged, David stepped up even more. He not only ensured Clara had access to necessary medical care, but also began preparing a home for the baby, even as resistance mounted from all sides. As the months passed, the bond between them grew stronger. Clara, who had long worn distrust like armor, began to lower her defenses. David's constant presence and willingness to help made her feel more confident, even amidst the chaos surrounding them. When the time for the birth came, it happened earlier than expected. Lucas was born prematurely, bringing a mix of worry and hope. The scenes at the hospital were emotional. Doctors working tirelessly to stabilize the baby, Clara clutching his hand, and David standing beside them, fighting back tears and promising that everything would be okay. Against all odds, Lucas recovered. The little boy, though fragile at first, showed a strength that seemed almost out of proportion to his tiny frame. When Clara saw him in David's arms for the first time, she couldn't hold back her tears. That moment was a kind of rebirth for her as well. From then on, the dynamic between the three began to change. Society, which had once only pointed fingers, started following the story with curiosity. Sensational headlines gave way to more sensitive articles, focusing on resilience and the impact of David's kindness. Lucas's birth brought not only a new life into the world, but also symbolized a transformation for everyone involved. Clara began to see that she could be more than someone who relied on help, while David discovered the chance to be more than just a wealthy businessman. Lucas, with his arrival, had become the powerful link connecting the two. But this was only the beginning of a chapter filled with even more surprises and challenges. Lucas grew up to be a child, full of energy and curiosity. By the age of 3, he was already showing a fascination with numbers that surprised even David and Clara. One day, while playing with puzzle pieces, Lucas began organizing and adding numbers in ways that left his parents amazed. "He's just playing around, isn't he?" Clara asked, as David watched in awe as their son solved math problems beyond the capabilities of much older children. Lucas's talent was extraordinary. A true genius was starting to emerge. Word of Lucas's unusual abilities quickly spread, drawing the attention of experts. A university professor who heard about the child prodigy visited the family and confirmed what David and Clara had suspected. Lucas had exceptional potential. The professor recommended special programs to nurture his abilities, but David and Clara faced a dilemma. While they wanted Lucas to have the right opportunities, they also feared that too much exposure could rob him of the simplicity and joy of childhood. Lucas's talent was both a blessing and a new challenge for the family. As Lucas's abilities came to light, David's former critics began to approach him again, this time with praise and offers of support. But David remained cautious. He knew many of these compliments were driven by hidden agendas. Together, he and Clara decided to protect Lucas, ensuring he could develop his gift without losing the lightheartedness of being a child. For them, the real challenge wasn't just fostering Lucas's talent, but keeping him grounded in what truly mattered: simplicity, love, and the values that bound their family. Clara never imagined she would one day have the chance to share her story publicly. The invitation to a live interview came as a surprise, and though hesitant at first, she decided to accept. Sitting in front of the cameras, her heart racing, she began to recount her journey, the pain of losing her family, the despair of living on the streets, and finally, the unexpected encounter with David. Her words were filled with emotion and sincerity, touching not only the audience, but also those who had judged her before. For the first time, Clara felt that her voice was being heard. The impact was immediate. Social media filled with messages of support and admiration. People began to see Clara differently, recognizing her strength and resilience. During the interview, she made sure to thank David, not just for his material help, but for the unwavering faith he had in her from the beginning. "He believed in me when even I couldn't believe in myself," she said, her eyes welling with tears. The authenticity of her words disarmed critics and generated empathy from those who had once looked down on her. From that moment on, Clara became a symbol of resilience. Opportunities began to open up. Invitations to give talks, partnerships with non-profit organizations, and even social campaigns aimed at helping others in similar situations. Clara, once just another invisible face in the crowd, was now respected and admired. But for her, the greatest reward was knowing her story could inspire others to believe in their own potential for transformation. Time passed, but the story of David, Clara, and Lucas continued to inspire everyone around them. The family, which had started in such an unlikely way, had become a shining example of unity and perseverance. Together, they founded an organization dedicated to helping homeless people, providing shelter, education, and opportunities. Clara, who knew firsthand the weight of abandonment, led projects with a passion that captivated everyone she met. For her, each story of transformation was a personal victory, a testament to the fact that no one should be defined by their past. David, in turn, discovered a new purpose. He realized that his wealth could be used for more than just luxury and status. It could transform lives and offer hope. He began using his influence to create social initiatives and open doors for those who, like Clara, needed a chance. "If I could go back in time, I'd do it all over again without hesitation," he often said, making it clear that the criticism and challenges had been worth every effort. His life, once empty and centered on material success, was now filled with something he had never experienced before: the true impact of good deeds. Lucas, the little genius who had astonished everyone, remained a central figure in this story. Despite his extraordinary talent, David and Clara always prioritized his childhood and the values they wanted to instill in him. He grew up surrounded by love, learning not only to develop his abilities, but also to value compassion and humility. At family organization events, it wasn't uncommon to see him playing with other children, showing that despite his gift, he was still just a kid. The final scene of the story is deeply moving. David, Clara, and Lucas appear together, happy, at a fundraiser for the organization they created. As Lucas runs between tables, David holds Clara's hand and says, "If I had known the impact this decision would have, I'd have done it all much sooner." The message is clear. True wealth lies not in material possessions, but in love, compassion, and the lives we transform. The story of David, Clara, and Lucas teaches us something profound. The decisions we make, even the most unlikely ones, have the power to transform lives, starting with our own. The impact of a simple act of kindness can break barriers, heal wounds, and create a future no one could have imagined. What about you? How many times have you hesitated to act for fear of being judged? Maybe it's time to look beyond appearances and believe in the potential that exists in every person, including yourself. What would you do if you had the chance to change someone's life today? Are we using what we have, whether it's time, attention, or resources, to make a difference? Let this story be a reminder that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with a single step, a bold decision that defies prejudices and inspires new possibilities. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others, spread the message, and help create a world where more Davids have the courage to act and more Claras get a chance to start over. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to keep learning from stories like this. Stories that could change your perspective and, who knows, your life.